Coming up on this episode of Nintendo Cartridge Society. Get your pre-orders in now. We're doing the ABCs of console launches. Eyes of Skull has a secret, so the Nintendo Cartridge Society has a secret with you. Welcome to Nintendo Cartridge Society. My name is Patrick Ellis, and I'm joined, as I'm always joined by my co-host, Mark Mitchell. Mark, how's it going?
It's going great. Patrick, I've been watching The Traitors on Peacock. And it's a television show where for the last few seasons it's like a reality competition show.
Mm-hmm.
They invite maybe like 18. Can't remember how many people they start with. Maybe that's too many. Maybe like 14. Reality show personalities.
Now, is it always
Scotland?
What is it always all reality?
It
people?
Didn't used to be. In the first season, they did half reality and half normal people, and the normal people just got stomped. And so I think they realized, we should do all people who are used to being on TV.
Sure.
And so in one of the most recent challenges, they had to
possible spoilers for Traitors here.
Yeah.
I know people care about that stuff, Mark.
There was an endurance challenge where two people had to hold hands inside a box.
Yes.
And then in the box they would start putting horrible things like bugs and all that kind of stuff. And the goal was just to keep your hands clasped together.
So it's my I have heard about this. And it's my understanding that they escalated to just dumping bugs and stuff on their heads.
They did just dump bugs on people's heads. The one thing they also did was they just brought out snakes and draped a snake over somebody's shoulder. And this leads to my question for you, which is, are you more scared of snakes, bugs, spiders? If you and I were holding hands in a box,
right? Like we do every night.
Like we do, yeah. That's how we record this podcast.
Yep.
Would the snakes put you over the top?
What's the thing that breaks
the bugs
me?
put you over the top?
So I don't. So with I don't think snakes put me over the top, especially if I'm on a TV show and it's they're not going to put a cobra or a python right. They're not going to put a snake that can't hurt me. I'm fine with.
Yeah, I feel the same way.
And bugs. I will get if there's a potential for them to be in my clothes, I think that's where it gets me, right? A bug on my hand, fine. Several bugs on my hand, fine. If it's crawling up my leg, on the inside of my pants, it's making me I think a little bit right now.
Yeah, no, I'm
squirming.
Anything that for me that is spider or spider adjacent.
Yeah.
That would be tough for me. If they put tarantulas in the box or daddy long legs or something.
I think we got to move off this topic. I don't think it's good for people listening to this to imagine
You're right.
daddy long legs in your pocket. I think that's a negative experience, Mark.
That's fair.
But if you would like a positive experience, look, Mark, we are today, March 6th, is 27 days away from the Switch 2 Direct.
Wow.
Is that right? Did I update this information? We are 27. Yes, that's right. We are 27 days away from the Switch 2 Direct. Mark, you and I have sworn off making predictions about what this Direct is going to be about.
We just don't think we'd be any darn good at it.
That's right. We think we'd be bad. We think we would not have fun. But we think that you, listener, listening to this show, that you would do a good job.
Yeah, you're smarter than us.
You're smarter than us. Look, you've listened to us forever. So, some of what you're going to predict is going to be informed by what we've said, right? So we're looking for your predictions. So email us, Nintendo Cartridge Society at gmail.com. By March 26th at noon, let us know what you think is going to happen during the April 2nd Nintendo Direct Switch 2 reveal thing. What you think is going to happen, what you're afraid is going to happen, what you hope is going to happen. All kinds of predictions are good, and we want them. Thank you to everyone who sent them already, but keep them coming.
Yes, we can't have enough.
Yes, that's right. We are insatiable. We just need more. So do that. Also, if you want to support us, you can head on over to patreon.com/Nintendo Cartridge Society, where if you're supporting us at the 8 or 16-bit levels, you get access to our once-a-month episodes of miniseries that we're doing, like NCS Arcade.
Yeah, we're currently in the 3rd season of NCS Arcade, where Patrick and I are mostly playing games that we've never beaten before. For February, we played ToeJam and Earl, and that episode is available now. And for March, we're going to be playing Okami.
That's right. If you have any thoughts about ToeJam and Earl or the episode that we recorded about it, email us, Nintendo Cartridge Society at gmail.com. We'll be incorporating those into the listener feedback episode. That's free to everyone who follows us on Patreon, regardless of what level, including the free level. Then that all happens. That's all what that is. I'm excited to dig into Okami. Mark, have you started it yet?
No, I haven't.
Okay, we both got to get going because it's a longer game.
Yep.
But super excited for that. Also, email us so you can get in the Discord if you're not already there. Email, I'll send an invitation. But Mark, in the meantime, I think we should just get into our main topic at hand, because we got an ABCs and those take kind of a while. So let's do it. Let's do the ABCs of Nintendo console launches. Asterisk part 1.
Part 1.
So we've gotten in the habit of splitting these up over 2 episodes because it's 26 items times 2. That's a lot of items.
I think there was a time where we at least once did an ABCs maybe of Zelda in a single episode.
Well, here's the thing is that we started doing these over the pandemic, and we were just like, I don't know, you want to hang out on Zoom for 2 hours? And the answer was like, yes, of course. What else am I doing? So yeah. It's where we're breaking them up, and then we can just sort of luxuriate in each of our individual items. Mark, why are we talking about this?
Well, we just celebrated the 8th anniversary of the Nintendo Switch's launch, and we have the Switch 2 launch to look forward to, presumably in the next couple of months.
Yes, and it's always like a volatile kind of, like, if you're looking at it as a Nintendo enthusiast and you're like, look, I know I care about this thing kind of no matter what they put out. But like, there's a little while there where you're like, am I going to be excited about something good or excited about something stupid?
Yeah, it's nice to be able to look back on some of these, because the dodgier ones, now in the Switch era, we can look back and be like, oh, it all turned out fine.
Yes.
But there's always the chance with the next thing
I know
that it doesn't turn out fine.
I mean, honestly, through like Nintendo's history, it's mostly not fine. Right? Like, a lot of these launches are like borderline disastrous. And like, they put the things out and eventually they, we'll talk about some of these like kind of concepts around this as we go, I'm sure. But so Mark and I have each prepared one thing about console launches per letter here, and we will go back and forth. I don't know what Mark has prepared. He doesn't know what I have prepared. We may have overlap.
Who
knows?
We may.
But so, Mark, would you like to go first, or would you like to go second?
I will elect. Should we introduce a coin flip element to this?
Great. Yes, let's do it.
Okay.
So I've got my wallet here.
Okay,
I'm going to flip my wallet, and it'll be heads will be the driver's license side, tails will be American Express.
Okay, perfect.
And so you call it in the air, and if it's your call, then you go first. Okay.
Driver's license.
Okay, we already established that was heads. You could just say heads. It landed on American Express, so I will be going first.
Okay.
Okay. My A.
Sorry, I just want to say, if we do that in the future...
Do you want an actual coin?
No.
I'm so sorry I didn't prepare.
No, I'm happy with the wallet. The wallet, I'm happy
Yeah.
with. If we do that in the future, I think that whoever wins...
Gets to decide?
Oh. Like at the start of a football game.
Okay, Sarah just handed me some Hanukkah gelt. But the problem is that both sides are a menorah. So there's no difference between them. We can't actually flip this coin. It doesn't work. Sorry. So whoever wins should get to pick?
Yes.
Okay, but that's just in the future.
In the future.
Okay, great. I agree to those terms. Also, if I can find, because I have that Mario Odyssey coin.
Oh, right.
From my pre-order for Super Mario Odyssey. So I should find that and
finally
use it.
A use for some of that pre-order stuff.
What are you saying?
Nothing against you.
Okay, all right. Anyway, I'm going first, and my A is actually a little bit of a zag, and maybe less addressing a launch that we had, and more of a potential launch that could have been.
Mm-hmm.
My A is for Atari. Mark, the Famicom launched in Japan in 1983 and was successful, right? So Nintendo was like, great, we're going to start trying to publish this thing in foreign markets, but they didn't really know how to do that. So the first partner that they reached out to try and get the Famicom out to an international audience was Atari. So this is like in 1983, and in their talks with Atari, they were going to be putting out the Nintendo Enhanced Video System.
Huh.
And with tentative plans to release by the end of 1983. Just remember 1983 and what happens to Atari and video games in the United States in 1983. That's the year of like the video game crash, basically, right? And a lot of that is spurred on by Atari's ET, right?
Right.
That's maybe more of a symptom than it is anything else, but so Nintendo and Atari had this like agreement that they were going to be like that. This was how the what was then the NEVS and not the NES was going to come to the rest of the world, and the like final contracts were going to be signed at the 1983 Summer Consumer Electronics Show at CES, and Atari backs out at the last minute because they had seen at the same show the Coleco version of Donkey Kong running on like the ColecoVision, like that hardware, right? Because Nintendo had sold the console rights to Coleco for Donkey Kong, and the home or the computer system, the computer rights to Atari. So due to like backwards compatibility weirdness, the Coleco Donkey Kong could run on Coleco home computers as well. So Atari was like, you've screwed us here, Nintendo. And so it queers the whole deal, and they end up obviously not going with Atari to launch the Nintendo Enhanced Video System and have to do it themselves a couple years later as the NES.
I had no idea that they had come to an agreement in principle. Like I thought that they had, like talked to Atari, but that those talks ended really early. I didn't realize that they were that close to signing a deal. That's so interesting.
The contract that this is from Wikipedia and it's all sourced, but so maybe it's wrong, but they had like the final contract papers at CES.
Yeah, that's so interesting. I didn't realize it was that close. Also, it goes to show, do you think deals like that still happen at these trade shows?
I mean, probably not, right?
But I feel like that like must have been what E3 was really important for
totally.
A while, right?
Yes. Well, and CES and all of these shows where it's like, yeah, this is from Japan. It's 1983. Like, to make a phone call to Japan is going to cost you a small fortune. There is no email. You know what I mean? That like even to communicate these ideas would be super difficult. But yeah, it is crazy to think that like at these big conventions, they have to just like start hashing stuff out and discovering things like, wait a minute, Coleco also has Donkey Kong,
right?
That like that's a discovery you have to make at CES.
Wow. Yeah, it's so difficult to imagine what would have happened if that deal had gone through.
Yeah, it's true, and it really is like an alternate history of like what would the Atari Nintendo Enhanced Video System, what would that have been, and would the next Nintendo thing even come out?
Right. Wow. That's really cool.
So my A is for Atari. Is that like a little bit of a sidestep and maybe a sour note to start on? Who knows?
No, I learned something. I thought that was super cool. I have two A's.
Okay.
One is for accessories because at any console launch, there are always other stuff that they want you to buy. Nowadays, I feel like this has changed because I feel like in the days of the NES and even with the Super Nintendo, they like you got a whole kit. They were selling it as like
true,
yes. Like a bundle, as like a thing. And I think it's because in the earlier days of video games, they were trying to sell it as like a value. You know, like
Yeah.
like for parents, yes, you're buying a video game system, but it comes with all of this stuff. So you don't have to spend additional money after you do this. And
Yeah.
which is I feel like so different from how it's approached today, where it's like, oh, we're stripping away as much as possible so we can sell this cutting edge tech for as low a price as we can get away with.
Right.
And then
you buy everything else.
and then you
piecemeal.
buy a pro controller, or you buy, like component cables,
Right.
or you buy whatever.
Well, it's also like when you're talking about like the Super NES, like that that early in like the early 90s, that there wasn't that big of a market for like third party controllers, and like Game Genie is still sort of like a fringe kind of idea in the 80s, or like when does Game Genie come around? The 90s at some point, right?
I'm not sure.
I'm actually not sure, but like it takes a while for people to realize that like they can make money off having accessories for like these existing video game consoles.
Yeah, totally. And that kind of includes the companies themselves.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay, my other one for A is taking a different tact, and I want to talk about the Nintendo 3DS Ambassador program.
Great. Let's talk about the Ambassador
because
program.
this is a little bit of
not part of the launch, but a result of a
result
launch,
of a bad launch. So when the Nintendo 3DS first launched in North America, the price for it was $250.
Right.
And then that was like in April or something. I can't remember exactly when the 3DS launched. And then on August 12th, so just a few months later, they dropped the price to $170.
Right. Huge price drop. Like, 1/3 of the price just vanishes there.
And so
or a quarter of the price or something.
So it's like a make good for people who had bought the system just potentially a few weeks earlier for
yes.
$250. They created this ambassador program. And basically what it was is that if you set up your Nintendo 3DS and you logged into the eShop before August 12th, so before the day that the price dropped, you became a Nintendo 3DS ambassador. And as part of that program, you got 10 NES games, and then was it also 10 Game Boy Advance games starting in December of that year? They became available for you to download.
Notable because while the 3DS did have a virtual console that you could buy classic games on, the Game Boy Advance was never part of that lineup.
Yeah, the only way that you could play Game Boy Advance games on the Nintendo 3DS ever was if you were part of this ambassador program.
Which is crazy, because it means that there were games like Minish Cap, Metroid Fusion, Metroid Zero Mission, the Golden Sun games. Actually, I don't know if all of those were part of it, but I like Metroid Fusion for sure was.
Yeah, the 10 games were for the 10 Game Boy Advance games were Metroid Fusion, Mario vs. Donkey Kong, Mario Kart Super Circuit, Yoshi's Island, Super Mario Advance 3, WarioWare Inc., Mega Micro Games, The Legend of Zelda: The Minish Cap, Fire Emblem: The Sacred Stones, Wario Land 4, F-Zero Maximum Velocity, and Kirby and the Amazing Mirror.
I mean, just an absolute like banger lineup of games that they could have been selling on the 3DS, but never did.
Yeah,
it was truly like the NES games you would be able to buy, and like you could make up for having not been one of the ambassadors. But these 10 Game Boy Advance games, like if you have a 3DS that has the ambassador games installed on it, that's like a holy grail of a piece, right?
Were you a?
I was not.
I wasn't either. I got my first 3DS maybe Christmas of 2011, and it was after the price drop had happened.
Yeah. Me too. Well, and like part of it really is like $250 when it came out. Like that's a high price point.
Yeah,
for a handheld, right?
But they were feeling so good after the Nintendo DS.
I know, and I have a point later on about like one of the reasons, or one of the things around the 3DS's launch that I think probably affected it more than Nintendo was expecting. But we will get to that in a bit. Mark, would you like to give us your B?
Yes, my B is for bundled games.
Very good.
So these are the consoles that I know for sure were bundled with a game at launch.
Okay, great.
And some of them are pretty. I think there's only 3. So Game Boy came with Tetris.
Right.
Super Nintendo came with Super Mario World
at launch. Because by the time I got my Super NES, it was not bundled with Super Mario.
Yeah,
World.
it was in North America, it was the only way to get Super Mario World. You couldn't buy, like, there was no separate selling of it until 1992.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
I didn't realize that.
And then Wii with Wii Sports.
Right.
Those are the 3 that I can think of, and it's crazy how foundational all 3 of those are. Like,
I know.
Basically giving away,
right?
At least in North America, your 3 of the biggest games for the system. Maybe that's why they became the biggest game. But like Tetris for Game Boy, Super Mario World for Super Nintendo.
Yeah, but I mean, for to my mind, they're all remarkable. But it's the Wii Sports one, right? Where it's like Wii Sports sells the Wii, right? Tetris is like an absolutely crucial like pack-in game, but I think you could probably sell Game Boys without Tetris, and people would buy it anyway. But like, I don't think like people play Wii Sports. They think that Wii Sports is the Wii, right?
I think it's I think you're totally right. I think it's one of those difficult chicken and egg situations.
That's
like,
also true. Yes.
Was Game Boy a phenomenon because it had Tetris packed in? Was Super Nintendo it sold less than the NES, but is part of the reason, you're right. They must have bundled Super Mario World in with the Super Nintendo to incentivize people to upgrade, which is just such a crazy way to think about it now.
So, obviously the NES, when it launched, wasn't bundled with any games, but so many of, like, the NES also had like a weird launch, right, where it was like kind of staggered and like in only a couple markets first, and like by the time it really started to pick up steam and like kids were getting them and like people were buying them for their families, they were usually in these packs that either had Super Mario Brothers or Super Mario Brothers and Duck Hunt, or even Super Mario Brothers Duck Hunt and World Class Track Meet with all the accessories for them. That's sort of what you were alluding to before, of like these things would come packed with all this stuff together. But so by the time the Super NES launches, I think those pack-ins had become the norm, even if that wasn't how the NES launched. So like that's what they were just trying to meet.
Well, the NES did launch with like bundles, which
sure
I'll talk about a little bit later, but I know what you mean, and I don't know, it's just kind of crazy to me that they were giving away like Super Mario World.
Yeah, sure.
Or really, like you said, like Wii Sports. And I know that they didn't pack in Wii Sports in Japan. It was always sold separately.
Right.
I don't know what the situation was in Europe.
I guess I don't know either.
I think it was a pack-in
European
game,
listeners,
but I don't
write
know
in,
for
let us
sure.
know.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, but it's, I mean, the ubiquity of Wii Sports is the same as the ubiquity of the Wii, right? I feel like it only gets into nursing homes or whatever because it comes packed with
yeah,
Wii
totally.
Sports.
I also think it kind of probably speaks to the way that like the video game business has grown and how much larger it is now, where I don't feel like they feel the need to have to pack in games anymore. Like, it's a marketing beat that they can use later to goose sales. Like bundles become something that comes later after the early adopters have bought the console.
Right. Well, and also like the gaming audience is so like fractured, where it's like, what game can you put in that literally everyone is going to want to play?
A Mario game.
The answer is Mario Kart. I mean, that's right. Like that I guess is the answer. But there was obviously we saw with this generation that like Animal Crossing is also like a reason to buy a Switch, right? And if the only way to get a Switch was because it came bundled with Mario Kart, maybe people who wanted Animal Crossing would like grumble about that, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. My B, Mark, is a theorem that I had and that I voiced on the show, and has maybe proven to be not true at all. I had said that a new Bomberman game suggests that we are nearing a launch window as Bomberman games make themselves known at launch. And this, to my research, has only been true twice. That the Switch launched with Super Bomberman R, and that the Game Boy Color launched with Pocket Bomberman. So is my Bomberman theory, which then are you
did we not get a Switch Bomberman in the launch window?
That's what I said.
Oh, I thought you said okay.
Switch, yeah.
Okay.
2017 Super Bomberman R comes out on launch day. And then Pocket Bomberman on the Game Boy Color. Those are the only two. But for whatever reason, I was like, yeah. In the first month of every console, there's a Bomberman game, because they just want to like get one. When are you going to release a Bomberman? I don't know. When people don't have anything else to play on the system, and then they'll be excited about it. They'll play it for a week and never think about Bomberman again.
It feels true in my heart, even if
doesn't it feel true?
Even if the details don't back us up.
Moving on to my C, cards. Specifically, the AR cards that came with the Nintendo 3DS, which really only got look. I know they continued like making these things for the games, but outside of the like the cards that were packed in with the 3DS, I've never interacted with these, and I don't think anyone ever used these AR cards. Do you know what I'm talking about?
I do remember what you're talking about.
So they have specific graphics on them, and you can like basically scan them. The 3DS recognizes them and makes things happen.
Yeah, it like renders like a 3D image of Pit in your physical space. It's like an AR type experience.
Yeah, but they had like a whole series of cards specifically for Kid Icarus Uprising that would like do things in the game. It's sort of like a proto amiibo
Oh,
thing.
that part I didn't remember.
They did just
did like game functionality.
A ton of these things, which is again like an area of this that I personally did not explore. But so there were cards for Nintendogs and Cats, for Tetris Access, for Kid Icarus Uprising, for Bravely Default, for just a ton of these games. Just that they made so many of these things. Even like Kingdom Hearts got in on it. They did a bunch of AR cards. But like it's the kind of thing where I'm just like, I don't ever remember that being an actual driving point that like anyone I knew ever took advantage of.
Yeah, I feel like it's one of those gimmicks that happen with new consoles where, they're introducing a bunch of new ideas, a bunch of new features. Some of them are going to stick, and then some of them will just kind of go away.
Yeah. Yep. Yes, the cards. Mark, your C.
My C is Controller Pack, and that's PAC. No, that's PAK.
There we go.
Controller Pack. It's the Nintendo 64's memory expansion accessory that was available at launch.
What a weird... And, like, was there any application for it in those first two games?
So, I don't know for sure. I'm not sure what game supported it or not, but from what I was reading, it was used mostly in third-party games and the early games, because later in the system's life, they just started including memory packs in the console, in the cartridges themselves.
Right.
So you could just save data directly to the cartridge,
but
instead of requiring the memory expansion pack.
The thing is, they were doing it right away, right? Because like Mario 64, you saved right on the cartridge.
I can't remember.
You do.
Oh, okay.
I'm telling you.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was just like, what a weird, and especially because like, it's only a year or two later that Star Fox comes out with a Rumble Pack, and they're like, forget memory. We're never gonna make you do that. Just pop this Rumble Pack in there instead.
Yeah. So yeah, if you are unfamiliar with a Nintendo 64 or Nintendo 64 controller, on the back of the controller there was like a slot that you could insert this controller pack, or like you said later, the Rumble Pack. I just thought it's always fun to look back on the past and be like old tech and what used to be state of the art. The controller pack had 256 kilobytes of memory. So that allowed for 16 save files max.
Right. And so, like, do you think they were just doing this because, like, the PlayStation had been out for a little while and, like, the PlayStation obviously had memory cards? I say obviously, but, like, the system itself couldn't have had memory to...
Probably not then.
Yeah, I guess not.
It would have been so limited.
Right. I guess that's exactly why. But like that they were just like, oh yeah, okay, memory cards. I don't know, maybe maybe you take your game to like someone else's house and you just take the card instead of like.
Well, and I think that a lot of what I was reading was that a lot of third-party developers used the controller pack, used that to save game, because then it reduced the cost of the cartridge itself.
Sure.
Because they didn't have to include like a battery pack or any of that stuff.
Right.
And
cartridges were like notoriously expensive for third parties because they had to basically license them from Nintendo.
Right. So I think maybe it was in some ways a concession for the PlayStation era,
sure,
where the cost of manufacturing CD-ROMs was so much less than a cartridge. So
and
Nintendo
was
much
more on them.
Right. So Nintendo was like, okay, well, we'll have this system so that way you don't have to pay for a battery pack in your cartridge, and you can reduce costs that way. I don't know, just one of those weird accessories.
Yes, very weird.
Come with console launches.
And also like weird how few other controllers after that had like slots for like adding stuff.
Yeah, and I guess like the Nintendo 64 had on the console itself like the memory slot. But what I was gonna
but that was for RAM though, right?
Right.
Yeah.
I guess what I was going to say is that you're right. After the Nintendo 64 era, they just started doing it in the console itself. Like you inserted the memory cards into the front of the GameCube.
Well, yeah, that's right. The GameCube, I forgot, did still have and the because it played GameCube games. The Wii also still had memory card
that's
slots.
right, up at the top by the GameCube controller ports.
Crazy stuff.
Yep.
But yeah, I was thinking the only other controller I can think of that had like an expansion slot in it was the Dreamcast controller.
Oh, right.
Because it had those VMUs.
In like the middle?
Yeah, it's like right because it has a screen.
Yeah.
The VMUs have a screen, and you could like use it to play like very simple games on the memory card thing itself.
Right, because there was like a Chow.
Yeah, it's like a Chow Garden
Sonic
thing.
Adventure.
Yeah. And like the memory card has buttons on it and a D-pad.
That's amazing.
An insane thing. Just absolutely awful. Your D.
Yes, my D is Deluxe Set, which was available at the NES's launch. So there were two sets. There was like I can't remember what they called, like the Power Pack or something. And it came with the console, the, like AC adapter, controllers, no game, but it was just kind of like the classic set.
Yes.
And then you had the Deluxe Set, and this is the set that included Rob, the robot, the Zapper Gun, 2 controllers, the Gyromite, and Duck Hunt were all included.
Pretty good
in this deluxe set.
No Mario though.
No Mario. No Mario. But they must have known at that point that Mario was going to be, or they must have been betting that Mario was going to be hugely successful because it had already been so successful in Japan.
Yes, but they were still trying to market the NES as a toy more than the video game system. So they were really they were aiming for that toy shelf space, which is why it would come packed with a little robot operating buddy.
And I didn't realize
robotic operating buddy.
I think that's right.
Okay, I think that's right.
Yeah.
Cool. All right, great. My D is for delays. Launch windows get pushed back all the time. One notable one I wanted to shout out is that the Game Boy Advance was delayed because, and it has such a short life. But part of the reason for its delay is that they were like running behind on production because they had increased production on Game Boy Color because the demand for it was so high. Yeah, so like and all of this is like sort of riding the wave of Pokemon, right? And especially Pokemon Yellow, which is using the Game Boy Color functionality. That they had increased their monthly production of Game Boy Colors from 1.5 million a month to 2 million a month, and they were just like, we're not going to be able to get a critical mass of GBAs constructed in this time, because we'd rather be selling the Game Boy Color, which is like selling like hotcakes. So like the situation that we find ourselves in now with the transition from the Switch to the Switch 2, the Game Boy was kind of there already, where it's like, well, why are we putting out a new new thing of hardware when the old one is still selling so much. It's a dinosaur. It's old and technologically like irrelevant, but it is so the games are so like culturally important that it kind of doesn't matter. And that's a total backwards compatibility. It's kind of the same thing. You know what I mean?
So interesting. And the poor GBA, because it was really squeezed on both sides. It had such a short life because it got this delay because the Game Boy and Game Boy Color was selling so well. And then at the end of its life, the Nintendo 3DS basically just cut it off at the knees.
Totally, right? Comes in and is like, no, we're not here to replace the GBA. No, you're fine, buddy. Your station is...
I'm a third pillar.
I'm the third pillar. You're always the second pillar, baby. I'm not gunning for you. And then out, done. And we're moving all the way onto 3DS.
Wow.
So yes, that's delays. My E is for exclusives. Every launch of a Nintendo system is going to see some exclusives that will color the like public perception of the system for a long time, right? And I don't think it behooves us right now to go about listing them because I assume some of them will appear as individual entries on this list as we go forward through the ABCs of console launches. But it is something that, like, one of the things we're excited about, right, with the April 2nd Nintendo Direct about the Switch 2 is that we are guaranteed to get the reveal of a new Nintendo game, right?
Yeah.
And, like, probably a big one, and it's going to be a game you're only going to be able to play on the Switch 2. The exclusives are key.
Yeah, that's true. Especially for Nintendo, which a lot of times historically hasn't had the kind of third-party support that Sony or Microsoft has had. And so they've really relied on those exclusives.
Right. One is it's especially like strange in like with the most recent console like generation shift in like the not Nintendo world, right? In Microsoft and Sony, that like there have been exclusives, but that's not really like the selling point, right? Like the selling point is that all the games like look and run better and don't have loading times or whatever. But like still mostly like, yeah, we want people to play like Spider-Man again. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So yeah, just that Nintendo is not that. They're always going to be like, here's the exclusive. Here's the game that you need to play on this thing.
Ooh, that's good. My E is for Europe.
Very good.
Like, for half of, let's say that the Nintendo era, began with the launch of the NES in 1985. And so basically for half of Nintendo's life, it wasn't until the Wii that Europe was started getting consoles launched at the same time as Japan and North America. And it's really only super recently that they've been aligned, where they've done worldwide launches. So the NES, Europe started getting in 1986. The Super Nintendo, 1992. Like, it's all, like 6 months to a year after it's released elsewhere.
Nintendo itself being like a year or two after it's released in Japan.
So Nintendo 64, 1997. GameCube, 2002. The Wii, this is when they started. They didn't launch on the same day, but they did launch within days of each other.
Yeah. What's interesting is like there are a couple times where North America gets the console before Japan.
The Wii is an example of
that.
that.
Is an example of that. I think that DS or 3DS, one of them is
Could be
an example. But like never Europe.
Never Europe. But yeah, the Switch finally launches on the same day in all territories.
Very good. I like that the entire continent of Europe is your E. Mark your F.
My F is for F-Zero.
Very good.
It's for launch title for the Super Nintendo, designed specifically, and they love doing this, not just Nintendo, but basically all console creators love having one kind of like showcase title that shows off something that's only possible in the new system.
Right. And so I guess I'm gonna reveal what my M, which is my last entry, which is Mode 7, being like the sort of graphical showcase for the Super NES, and that Super NES launches with two games like really aggressively using Mode 7 graphics, one of which is F-Zero and the other one is Pilot Wings.
Yes, exactly. And my personal opinion, and maybe this is just because, I have always the Super Nintendo launched at the perfect time for me, and I've always loved like the Super Nintendo and the aesthetics of the Super Nintendo. But I feel like F-Zero lost something when it moved away from the Super Nintendo.
I mean, I agree. It's so the way Mode 7 works is that it simulates 3D by taking a like single flat image and like tilting it, right? So that it makes it a single polygon and then like can like rotate and like move around that single polygon, which then gives you the illusion that you are zipping through a futuristic city at lightning fast speed, because all it needs to do is just like scan around this one image as fast as possible. And that's what Pilotwings was doing as well.
But I also feel like F-Zero painted kind of a false picture of what the Super Nintendo would have in store, because F-Zero is all about being fast, and one thing that Sega in its marketing for the Genesis would knock the Super Nintendo for is kind of being like slower and pokier, and that was just kind of like the way that the Super Nintendo was portrayed, and you saw that in Mario World. Like, they chose to make games, maybe it was technical limitations, I don't really know, that were more about exploration and less about speed.
Yeah, I mean, I think those are artistic choices, right? Because the F-Zero is super fast, and like the next big racing game that we see on the Super NES is, of course, Mario Kart, which is using the same technology, the same Mode 7 technology, but it is a much slower game. And is some of that because like they built it so that you could always do split screen multiplayer and just like prioritize like processing two of these things at once over processing it really fast? Maybe. But like that's the more compelling choice, right? Yeah, I think blast processing was like made up, wasn't anything, and like the Sonic games were fast because they designed them to be fast.
They did love doing that around that era, because didn't PlayStation also have like the Emotion Engine or something like that?
Maybe, I don't know.
Yeah, I feel like they also had like some like marketing hook that was just showing how state of the art and realistic their games were.
Right. Well, and I remember there's the second mention of the Sega Dreamcast tonight, but that the Sega Dreamcast logo was "It's thinking." Not logo, but whatever their tagline,
yeah, their catchphrase,
and it's like, no,
it's thinking.
Just playing a video game.
Weird that didn't catch on.
Yep. My F mark is for financing. This is a user side thing, right? That every time a new console launches and you're like, I'm gonna get on this train here, I'm buying the new thing, you got to decide. You mentioned accessories before. We mentioned exclusives before. What all are you buying when this thing comes out, right?
Yeah, and you're always doing the dance of, do I trade in my old console?
Yep.
And what are the logistics of that going to be? Like, how do I facilitate doing that?
Yeah, no, it can be a real, and like most Nintendo systems launch with like a good game and another game. And you got to be like, all right, am I like getting on the other game train because like it's there, or am I just getting like the killer app? And it's at this point that I almost want to just like pose the question mark, like, what are we buying when the Switch 2 comes out?
Yeah, what third-party fighting game are we going to have ported to the Switch 2 for launch?
Yeah, for some reason I'm going to be buying Street Fighter 5 again.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah, or like a Mortal Kombat game, almost certainly. And like controllers, right?
Oh, for sure,
like,
yeah.
Are you buying another controller? Are you buying like 2 Pro controllers? Are you buying
for me
another
like
set of Joy-Con?
Of the first Pro controller I've owned?
Just still insane.
Well, I mean, I did buy the Pro controller for the Wii, but that was awful.
Right. Yes, that's a bad controller.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's there will always be like another thing. I just remember also like the Switch launch. Also, all those Zelda amiibo came out.
Oh, that's right.
Right. So like you could be going and like buying Zelda, 1-2 Switch, a Pro controller, and like 9 amiibo, including the Guardian, which was like huge and expensive. Yeah, like there's what all are we going to be buying on the Switch 2 launch day?
I don't think I talked about it. For some reason, I thought I had it written down in accessories, but I didn't mention it because I thought I was talking about it later, but I don't think I am. I did mention it, but I didn't dwell on it. Component cables. So for the Nintendo Wii was not HD resolution.
Right.
And that was a controversial decision because HD TVs were beginning to pick up momentum.
We were just teetering on the edge of it. Like,
yes.
It was still kind of early enough where like game developers were assuming you had an HD TV, but it wasn't always correct.
It was like the state of the art to have an HD
that's
TV.
Right. I just remember a buddy of mine having Dead Rising on the Xbox 360 and not being able to read the text as it appeared on screen because he was playing on like a regular TV and like wasn't big enough and it wasn't high resolution enough to actually read it. And so like I had a flat screen, like widescreen TV at the time, HD, a plasma thing that was like 100 pounds and like made the room hot. But it was it could display this thing properly. Dude had to come over and play it at my apartment because it wouldn't work on his TV.
So funny.
Yeah.
This was the time when like broadcast television would put its network logo in like the 4x3 part of it, but if you had an HD TV, you could sometimes get widescreen.
Yes.
But they also had to account for the fact that a lot of people are still watching it on like a 4x3 television. It was a weird transition time. So the Nintendo Wii did not ever support HD gaming, and it came with composite cables, it's like yellow, red, and white.
Right, and which is just one video output and two audio outputs, left and right.
But if you wanted to get a little bit better graphical output from your Nintendo Wii, you could buy component cables. And so I feel like having component cables for your Wii was like a sign that you were a gamer. You know,
which
you
is
were
so
serious
because you're just like, what are you doing to your Wii to make? And like you're playing Twilight Princess when it comes
out,
so, like, it's you want it to look as good as it can.
But you were a serious gamer, so you bought component cables for your Nintendo Wii, and I bought component cables for my Wii.
Yeah, so did I.
Yeah,
so did I. Back to the present and back to F. For financing, is that so? I'm done with that.
Yes.
Did you already give your F?
I did. F0.
Okay. So great. Moving on to my G, gimmicks. You will never be more inundated with the gimmicks of the console than you are at its launch. That's when we're going to be seeing when the 3DS is giving you the most 3D a game can be. They're going to be calling games 3D, Star Fox 64 3D.
You're going to be shooting at faces.
You are going to be shooting at faces as they float towards you. I mean, that's Wii Sports. That's Nintendo Land. Arguably, that's Mario 64. That's a gimmick that like pays off. But like that weird controller really only works perfectly for that game.
Yeah, that's 1-2 switch.
Yep. Yes. This is when you're going to be like Gimmick City, USA.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and give my H, which is HD Rumble, and it because I feel like the things about gimmicks the things about gimmicks are
the thing about gimmicks is
okay. We got there. The thing about gimmicks is they don't know what's going to stick, but they have to have something to talk about.
Yes,
and so they are introducing all this cool new technology, but they're trying things. They're like, well, what if we put an IR sensor in the right Joy-Con?
Right.
Is that something? And you have a game at least that will use it. I can't, this is not Nintendo, but I remember when I got my PlayStation 3, there was some game that, I can't even remember what it was called. It was probably like Dark Cross or like some game like that. But you would throw these blades, these like spinning blades, and then you would use the PlayStation 3's like 6-axis to like control the blade, kind of like the Beetle in Skyward Sword.
Yeah.
Like, and you would like control it through spaces to like slice the rope and have the door fall down. And it was annoying then, and I feel like the 6-axis didn't really get used for that kind of stuff.
No, well,
later.
then they stopped having the 6-axis controller.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, that like there is something that is fun, really fun to look back on. In fact, I think we did an episode of it not that long ago where we look back on the Switch's like gimmicks, the things that they were marketing super hard. And
just to see like how well any of it panned out.
Right. And HD Rumble was one of them, which like HD Rumble is fine, but I don't really think of it as different from any other Rumble.
Right. Well, and especially when you compare it to like what the PlayStation 5's controller does now, and I assume the Xbox, like I don't really know, but you have to assume that like, yeah, it's really like haptic feedback is really good now. And when they take the time to like invest in it, games can do really interesting things with them. But for the most part, they just treat it as like an on and off switch. Is it rumbling? Isn't it rumbling? And like it obviously just takes like a lot of like development time and like forethought to make HD Rumble or haptic feedback mean anything. And so most people are like, forget it. That's it. That's an afterthought.
Right. And most games like don't really incorporate rumble in that way, where it needs that precision of how many ice cubes are in this Joy-Con.
I mean that is true, but like you can do things that are evocative and like meaningful without having to be like gameplay features, right? Like you being able to guess how many ice cubes are in the, or metal balls are in the box. Like that's a gameplay thing, but like in Astrobot on PS5, when it's raining, you can feel the raindrops like in the controller.
Oh, it's like those 4DX movies.
Kinda, and it's like that's just like an environmental thing. It just like immerses you a little bit more, and it's just like fun and nice and good.
Yeah, that's cool. That's cool.
And anyone can do that.
I can't wait to see what the gimmicks for the Switch 2 are.
It's going to be incredible. We will feast, Mark. Okay, so that was your H, but now you got to go back and do your G.
Yes, and my G is the GameCube startup jingle.
Boom.
It's just so good.
Yeah.
And it was the first time that a Nintendo console had one.
Yeah.
Well, I guess like the Game Boy Advance had a little like chime when you turned it on.
And the Game Boy did have just the ding.
Yes, but the GameCube one is so good, and like the Wii had its own atmospheric like warbles when you turned it on. I have no idea what the Wii U's deal was.
Yeah,
but with the Switch, they got rid of a lot of the kind of more whimsical elements, and that was something that got the boot. I don't think the Switch does anything when you boot it up except show a Nintendo logo.
Oh yeah, that's right. Well, I so seldom turn my Switch on.
Right.
I just wake it up. Right? Yeah.
But yeah, the GameCube one, you heard that jingle every single time.
Yeah.
You started up a game. I think even if you turn on the console without a disc in, it would play.
Definitely. Well, because it did have like a little bit of a UI without even a disc in there. There was like a clock.
Mm-hmm.
I remember it when so the summer between my sophomore and junior years in college, we were my friends and I were like staying on campus in like one of the dorms that anyway, and I had a room on the first floor, and my buddy Scott had a room on the third floor of this building, and he had a double single. Or a double room that he was in by himself because it's the summer, and I was an RA right on the first floor, and we took all of the furniture from the room on the third floor and put it in my room on the first floor and made that our bedroom.
That's amazing.
And then everyone's furniture that we were hanging on to over the summer, we put in 301, which was like our living room. And so we had multiple TVs in there, and one of them was just the GameCube displaying a clock all the time. And we would, play GameCube games on it as well. But for the most part, it was our clock.
That's really funny.
But yeah. So yeah, love that GameCube startup sound and love that dumb GameCube clock. My H.
Your H.
Okay, my H is Hiroshi Yamauchi, the president of Nintendo for like 50 years. Okay, so this dude negotiated the rights to sell the Magnavox Odyssey in Japan, and like went on to strip mine talent from Sharp Electronics so they could eventually launch their first like Nintendo console, which is the Color TV Game 6, which just has 6 different kinds of Pong in it. This dude oversaw the launch of the Famicom and the NES, the Game Boy, the Super Famicom and the Super NES, the Virtual Boy, the Nintendo 64, the GameCube, and the Game Boy Advance before he passed the job on to Iwata.
And he's known for being real crusty, right?
He's known for being crusty and for being like hard to please, but like he's overseen more console launches than any human in history.
What a run.
Like it's we can't talk about console launches as a concept without bringing up Hiroshi Yamauchi.
And how funny to think of him as like kind of like a old so different from the way Nintendo portrays itself nowadays,
right?
Which is like our primary reason for being is to bring smiles to people's faces.
Yeah, but I mean, like, you know, Furukawa now, like he's a little bit more buttoned up, right?
Yeah, he
as a president,
outside of like the like investor, like the business side of it,
right?
He's not showing up in Nintendo Directs or anything.
Right.
That is true.
But yeah, just crazy to think that like with the you're right that like the personality that we think of as like the forward-facing Nintendo, like here's this guy who was around for and in charge during like 10 console launches. And more if we want to get into like Game & Watches and all that other kind of stuff. And that, yeah, he was just like a real hard ass or whatever. All right. You've already said your H.
Yeah. So
where are we now?
You go with I.
I go with I. My I, and this is going back to the 3DS and like the one of the little missteps here, is interference. So, and sometimes interfering with themselves. So the launch of the DSi in North America was March 28th, 2010. And it sort of gets its spot blown up by the announcement of the 3DS 5 days before the launch of the DSi.
Whoa.
So the Nintendo 3DS was revealed by Nintendo on March 23rd, 2010. And they did this because like leaks were like getting out there and they needed to like preempt it, like just get out there and be like, we've got this other thing coming out. But it's less than a week before the DSi comes out, which, and you know, it's a little bit like it's some of the same story with the these like incremental things, just like the Game Boy Color to the Game Boy Advance, right? Where it's like these things just get in the way of each other. And like, how do you market one thing while like the other thing's coming out? And it's just unfortunate that they got in the way of the launch of the DSi with the announcement of the 3DS.
Wait, sorry.
Yeah.
That's so crazy to me that the DSi really didn't come out until 2010?
March 28th, 2010 in North America, yeah.
Wow. Yeah, that's blowing my mind.
And the 3DS was revealed 5 days before that. Like they had been like ramping up marketing on DSi, and then had to be like, by the way, the next thing, the better thing is coming out next. You know, Iwata is like interviewed at the time, being like, "Oh, the people who are excited about the 3DS are still going to buy it, even if this other thing just came out, and it's not going to like." Totally expressing like, "We're not worried," and then have this thing blow up with the 3DS and having to do the ambassador program afterwards. It's like, no, they bungled some marketing messages.
Wow. Here. Yeah, that's totally throwing me, because in my mind's eye, I like see myself with a DSi in like one apartment, but that can't be true if it didn't come out until 2010.
Right.
Interesting. Okay. Well, my I is initial stock shortages.
Yeah, great.
A Nintendo classic. I can specifically remember it happening around the Nintendo DS Lite. I remember when those were like impossible to find and I really wanted to get one, and so I would like check Target every morning to see if they had gotten a shipment of Nintendo DS Lites. The Wii also was really difficult to get in the beginning.
Yes.
And then also with the Nintendo Switch.
Yep.
The first few months, it was really challenging to get your hands on a Nintendo Switch. Not even to mention a ton of other Nintendo products like the NES Classic Edition
Yep.
that
Well,
were just
yes.
like basically impossible. I feel like Nintendo has been talking a lot about how they're trying to avoid that for the Switch 2, and it will be interesting to see if that's the case because in some ways, people have accused them of doing shortages on purpose to drive demand.
Right.
And I mean, it's worked for them in the past, so
right, but
purposeful or not.
Right. But at this specific juncture, it's kind of like, well, what even, like, what's even the point? Like, just get them. What they need to do is just get the next generation of systems in as many hands as possible, so they can like comfortably and confidently make games exclusive for it, and know that there'll be a huge audience for it. Because the difference between releasing something on Switch and releasing something on Switch 2, even if they can move 20 million copies or 30 million copies or whatever in the first year, which sounds crazy, it's still a tiny fraction of the number of Switch 1s that are out there.
Yeah. That brings me to my J, and that is the Jet Black GameCube, which I have never seen in real life.
Everyone just wants the purple one.
And didn't realize that it was a launch color, that there were two colors at launch. There was the purple, that's what my GameCube is. I didn't have a launch GameCube, but when we got a GameCube, it was the purple one. And then there was Jet Black. I had no idea. That it was, because I know that they, did colors later, like they had a silver one, and
yeah,
I'm sure,
well, there's like an orange one, yeah.
But they kind of like go back and forth on this. Like the Wii U had two different colors at launch. There was the white one and the black one.
Right.
With the Switch, they started just moving to like Joy-Con colors being different,
which is smart, right? Like, and the Switch lights, obviously they sell those in different colors, as well. But yeah, I don't really know what would be the point of selling different colored Switches.
Well,
themselves.
They did, right? There's some like special editions.
I guess that's true, yeah.
That have it, but
that's special edition, right? Like that makes sense. For the most part, like the thing is just black.
So let me know if you owned a Jet Black console at launch. Like if you were a
GameCube console, yeah.
Yeah, GameCube console at launch. You had the choice between purple and black, and you opted for the black. Because I literally have never seen one ever.
Right.
I feel like everybody I knew who had a GameCube, which was not that many people, had the purple one.
Right. Well, they didn't sell that many. It's also crazy that like that was true of the controllers at launch too, right? That there was the black and the purple. And I mostly remember seeing the purple. I think I've seen the black controllers though. Right?
I don't know, because we had a bunch of third party like Mad Catz.
Right. Yes. Those were usually black too, right?
Ours are like see-through orange and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
So
bring it back. Yeah. Bring back that see-through orange. That's great. My J is Joneses, as in keeping up with the Joneses. And just thinking about how much of the sort of like impetus for keeping up with a new console launch is that you just want the new thing. You see other people have the new thing and you're like, I want the new thing too. Even though we all kind of know and like recognize that like a Nintendo console library gets good in like the third year, right? That by year 3 they've like settled into it. They've like fired their big guns in the first like year or so, and then like are coming back with like second takes and a lot of that same sort of stuff. By the third year, there's a Smash Brothers on there. There's a new Mario Kart game. They've maybe introduced something new. But at the beginning, you're keeping up with the Joneses. You're getting it even though it's only launching with 2 games.
Yeah, launches are usually pretty lean.
Yes. So you just do it to,
yep. To have the state of the art.
That's right. J, now K for me. Kiosks.
My K is also kiosks.
Here we go. K's a tough one to do.
Yeah.
We had to stop holding hands for a second so we could high five. And people were dumping spiders on us and we didn't like it. Yeah, because like this is, and I know they do this for a lot of Nintendo consoles in the lead up to their launch, but in my mind, it's the Nintendo 64, right?
Mm-hmm.
That like there's a kiosk for it set up at the Toys R Us, and that's where you first played Mario 64, and you were like, oh, I get it. They're doing something completely different here, and I have to have this thing in my life.
Yeah, and this is how like kiosks are how I sampled a bunch of different consoles, not just Nintendo consoles. Like I never owned a Dreamcast. I never knew anyone who owned a Dreamcast, but I remember going to like Blockbuster Video and they had a Dreamcast.
Third mention of the Sega Dreamcast.
Yeah, of console setup and playing like Dreams into Night or whatever it was called. Just being baffled by it.
Nights into Dreams, but yes.
Nights into Dreams. And yeah,
which may be a Saturn game now that I'm saying it. Keep going.
But yeah, maybe it was the Saturn. I'm not sure. But so I did not, growing up, get any consoles until like years after they had already launched. My parents were never buying us the newest stuff. And the first console that I bought at launch, I'm fairly confident, is the Nintendo Switch. Like, I'm pretty sure that's the first one that I had for launch day. And so the kiosks is how I experienced a lot of games, or a lot of like the newest, until, you know, like years down the line when there would be a price drop or something like that finally incentivized my parents to get it.
Nights into Dreams was a Saturn game.
Okay, so
just to confirm,
Saturn.
Right. I don't know if there's a
Dreamcast sequel.
A Dreamcast Nights game. Nights into Dreams has been cited as one of the greatest video games ever made. What?
Source.
Yeah,
citation
needed. 100% citation needed. Yeah, no, it's also like just cool to be, because I used to really enjoy like going to Best Buy or Toys R Us or whatever, and just like seeing the video games like sitting there in their cases, right? And I don't really know like what I got out of that, but I just liked seeing them. I like knowing what was out. And then the fact that you could then also play something for like 5 minutes, like all the better.
Yeah, totally. I feel like part of the reason why Nintendo has to have these like traveling shows that they're doing to show off the Switch 2 hardware is that there aren't that many places anymore that you can host these hands-on, right? Like, like there are Best Buys still in the United States. There's still GameStops, but you know, like I don't really know where else people go that you would put kiosks. That
like a Walmart probably.
Yeah, I guess
maybe a Target too.
Maybe they still do. I don't know when the last time. No, I've been into Target. They don't have any like game demo kiosks.
They don't have game demo kiosks, but they do have like game sections, right? Where you can still see like games on the shelf and like buy them. Yes. Okay. So kiosks, your L or my L? Let me do my L, and then you can do your L and M, because I already did my M, which is mode 7. And my L will be brief because we've talked about it on the show recently. But lines. I love standing in a line at a console launch. That's the most exciting line you'll ever be in. That's better than the line for a roller coaster or a new movie or whatever. People are excited to get the next thing. And there's like a little bit of camaraderie that you build up, and it's just always a good time.
That's great. My L is launch day pickup.
There we go.
For the same exact reason. And again, I've only done one. I've only done it for the Nintendo Switch. But it was super fun. And it's because everybody there, unlike you're saying like a roller coaster or something, everybody there is for the same shared experience. It's like the midnight showing of a movie.
Yes.
You know, where it's like, oh yeah, these are people who really are excited about this.
Yes.
And so everybody's in a good mood. You know, everybody's like, oh yeah, no, join your friends in line in front of me. It doesn't matter. Like, we're all getting it tonight.
That's right. We're all we've all pre-ordered where everyone's going to have a blast. What did you end up getting? Are you getting a Pro Controller? Or, you know, all that kind of stuff. Like, you can have the conversations that you've been like kind of holding to yourself or just been having with the podcast that you're listening to. And you can actually like have them with people in a real space who are all excited to get a new thing.
Yes. My M is Mario. And it has and it has been not true for the past few console launches, but there used to be a time where a new Nintendo console meant a new Mario game on day one.
Right.
Like
when is the last time that happened?
I think the last time that happened was the Nintendo 64. I don't think it has happened since then.
I mean, if we don't count like GBA, right? Because Super Mario
That's
Advance,
right. And maybe
Super
we do.
Mario
maybe
2.
We'll give the Mario Advance games that small amount of
Yes,
dignity.
that's
and
right.
we'll say it does count. So maybe since
right.
2001.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
That is the last time it's happened. But for the longest time, I think they felt the pressure to like deliver on a new Mario game. And so with of course with the NES launch in America, you had Super Mario Brothers. With the Game Boy, you had Super Mario Land. Super Mario World, like we talked about, was bundled in. And then you had Mario 64, and then you had Super Mario Advance 2. What, or was it a Super Mario Advance
colon Super Mario Brothers 2?
Okay.
Right.
But yeah, since then they have not felt that obligation anymore. Like a new Mario game is usually held until later in the console life cycle, but I remember a time when Mario had to be there at launch, and when he wasn't for the GameCube,
that it was catastrophic. Weird. Yeah, right, exactly. Sorry, I'm trying to figure out when exactly New Super Mario Brothers U came out. I don't think it was a launch game for Wii U, but I'm okay. November 18th, 2012. Is that?
So maybe
is that
maybe it was a launch title?
Is that the launch of the Wii U?
So maybe it was a launch title, and it's Super Mario, but Super Mario Brothers 2 did not. Right? That was, or no, sorry, New Super Mario Brothers 2. I don't know if I said that. That was not a 3DS launch title.
No.
But maybe you're right. Maybe it was a Wii U launch title.
Late 2012 is when the Wii U came out. Yeah, November 18th. So yes,
okay,
the Wii U is an example with a new Super Mario Brothers game. Yes.
So it doesn't always help.
Yes, it does not always help. The most recent time it did not help, but every other time I feel like it's been a pretty good driver of sales of the system, right?
Yeah, but one thing that's interesting about New Super Mario Brothers U, like we're talking about gimmicks, is when you had right. when you had Super Mario World and you had Mario 64, those were games that like the console was basically built
right
to play those games.
Absolutely.
And with New Super Mario Brothers U, that was not the case.
Right.
Like, it didn't really take advantage of the the tablet. Right. You could like draw
platforms
for but it wasn't necessary. Obviously it wasn't, because they were able to port it to the Switch just fine.
Exactly. Yeah, and part of that is just like, oh no, we can't have a Mario game trapped on a Wii U that no one is playing. Yeah, all right, great. So that then my M, of course, was Mode 7, which we already talked about. Mark, ready to close this out?
Yeah, that brings us to the end of part 1, but we'll be back next week with N through Z.
Yeah, with 26 more things. All right, let's close this out. All right, that is going to do it for this episode of Nintendo Cartridge Society. Thank you so much for listening to the show. Thank you to our 16-bit patrons, Connor McCabe, Patrice Millette, Kyle Seaborn, Drew Mackey. We appreciate you. We appreciate everyone who's listening or interacting with us in any way. Join the Discord, another way to interact with us, and just email us and I'll send you an invitation. Anthony DeLuca made our logo. Our theme music is provided by 8-Bit Betty. You can get more of his music by heading over to 8bitbetty.com or by listening right now. For my co-host, Mark Mitchell, this is Patrick Eller saying thank you for listening.